Good evening, everybody. Our top stories: President Trump showing poise, compassion, and strength on the world stage, warmly welcoming Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at the White House ahead of the high-stakes G7 meeting in Canada and the Singapore summit with Kim Jong-un.
There are a lot of good factors lined up for North Korea, a lot of tremendous factors that give it tremendous potential. It has tremendous potential because the people are great, and we would certainly like to see normalization.
President Trump insisting on denuclearization of North Korea and tough tariffs for the European Union, Canada, Mexico, and China if they don't agree to fair and reciprocal trade deals. We take up the president's America First agenda tonight with one of the president's men leading that initiative, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. Speaker Paul Ryan, more than sold out, he's shamelessly politically corrupt, publicly and theatrically urging rhinos and Dems to drop their immigration discharge petition, to join together, hold hands, and allow him to declare he's come up with a comprehensive solution, crafting new immigration legislation. Ryan then will give rhinos and Dems exactly what Ryan's corporate and Wall Street masters have demanded all along: amnesty for illegal immigrants.
When we had tough, thorny issues, we have long conferences. People come and they express their views. You actually find that there is more consensus than not, and that helps us legislate. So I think a lot of our members are appreciative of the fact that we have the right kind of conversations happening.
What you've just heard, of course, is an abject lie. The Ryan-led House of Representatives hasn't had regular order nor debate, thoughtful, long debate on any issue, let alone immigration. And tonight, how the politically corrupt leadership on Capitol Hill is driving the crisis at our southern border. Jessica Vaughn from the Center for Immigration Studies joins us, and the day of reckoning could be near for the corrupt forces of the deep state. The release of the Inspector General's report on the Clinton email scandal now set for next week, and a Senate hearing on DOJ and FBI corruption to follow the IG report within a matter of days. Former federal prosecutor Andrew McCarthy joins us tonight. We'll break down the latest on the biggest political scandal in American history. Oh, yes, and we will take up why Speaker Ryan's support of Trey Gowdy and his attack on the president couldn't have been more poorly timed. Poor baby. Our top story tonight: President Trump enters a pivotal and possibly historic period of his presidency as he projects his foreign policy vision on friends and foes alike. President Trump huddling with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, with whom he has developed a close personal bond since the early days of the administration. The focus of today's visit, the upcoming talks with North Korea. President Trump leaving no doubt that denuclearization is at the top of his agenda when he meets with Kim Jong-un. But today he also took time to highlight one of Japan's principal concerns: the fate of 12 Japanese citizens kidnapped by North Korea, some of whom have been missing since the 1970s.
About abduction. It was preeminent in our conversations. He talked about it long and hard and passionately.
But before the president can get to Kim Jong-un, he has to deal with a recalcitrant globalist G7. Those leaders await him this weekend in Quebec with demands for open borders and parasitic trade arrangements they've enjoyed for decades. Today, the heads of two of the G8's smallest economies, Emmanuel Macron of France and Justin Trudeau of Canada, appear jointly to threaten American jobs if President Trump keeps up his tariffs. Both so-called leaders, supposed free traders, issuing tariffs of their own in recent days, and the European Union has responded to the Trump talk of tariffs with $3 billion in duties on bikes, bourbon, and fishing boats. Canada wants to tax $17 billion of U.S. goods, including syrup, beer kegs, and toilet paper. The Trump administration today reaching an agreement with Chinese telecom giant ZTE. That telecom company will pay a $1 billion fine to the United States And the U.S. government will hold $400 million of ZTE's money in escrow as protection against future violations by ZTE. The company settling criminal and civil charges last year in connection with this violation of U.S. sanctions against Iran and North Korea. ZTE, also under this agreement, required to change its entire board of directors and executive team within 30 days. Our first guest tonight unveiling that agreement today, saying it imposes the most strict compliance that the United States has ever had on any foreign company. Joining us tonight, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. Mr. Secretary, great to have you with us. And let's begin with the most controversial part of this, I believe, and that is the ZTE agreement, a national security offense on the part of ZTE, and something, if you will, of a civil solution in the form of the monetary penalties. Your thoughts?
Well, it's more than monetary penalties. The important part is, in addition to the money, in addition to requiring a change in the board and the change in the management, we have made them agree that they will adopt our code of compliance and pay for people we insert into the company to monitor that compliance. The people we put in will report jointly to the new board chair and to the Department of Commerce. That's an unprecedented amount of surveillance to put into a company.
It is, and in particular, a Chinese company. It's unheard of and almost unimaginable, let alone unprecedented. The president, it was insisted upon rescuing ZTE when he found out from President Xi directly that some 88,000 people in China were losing their jobs. To what degree has this rescue been effective in keeping that company a going concern?
Well, they virtually shut down when we first put in the denial order. Denial order is one that requires them not to be able to take technology from American companies, from Qualcomm and their other vendors.
When you say take technology, we know that the Chinese are stealing somewhere around $500 billion in U.S. intellectual property every single year, and have been doing so for decades. Not always at that level, but certainly over the course of that time, trillions of dollars. How comfortable are you, how comfortable is the president that that is at an end with China?
Well, I don't know that we've solved all the problems of China, but I do think that we have changed the behavior of ZTE, because in addition to everything else, we retain the ability to shut them down if our monitors find that they do anything wrong in the future.
Let me ask you this, because you are the man responsible here for the president's initiative and executing his policy. There is a great deal of about communist China that makes this country appropriately uncomfortable. One is the front companies that with which they run an espionage operation, a global espionage operation. But in particular in this country, the communist country of China, there is also an advantage, and that is that President Xi Jinping, as the man who leads every aspect of that society, economy, and country, can say, if he and the president reach agreement, there will be no more espionage, those front companies will shut down, there will be no more theft in our universities and our colleges, there will be no more theft of U.S. intellectual property. That will go a long ways toward making, as a national security agreement, possible to reach trade and economic agreements that will be mutually beneficial to both countries, right?
Well, I agree with that. There are lots of structural changes that are needed so that we have an economy there that functions in a well-disciplined rule of order management fashion.
And G7, the president has just heard from President Emmanuel Macron of France, saying that he would not want to actually threatening President Trump and the United States with isolation at the G7 meeting. This is an absurdity from a man who seemed to be doing everything he could at one point to be the president's friend and ally, and now acting like some sort of upstart who's absolutely delusional.
Well, I think it is delusional to think that you can shut out the United States. The United States is a multiple in size and a gigantic multiple in military power to France. It's silly that he's taking the tack. The reason that we ended up putting the tariffs on the EU is largely that France led a decision that they wouldn't negotiate with us while the tariffs were pending, the tariffs on steel and aluminum. So you know what their reward was for pushing the president that way? He imposed the tariff. Pretend that they are free traders when they really are the most protectionist people around on the planet. We are the closest to free trade of any big country in the world.
You know, it's absolutely true. And France and Germany, but, Germany is supreme amongst the mercantilist economies and nations of Europe. But it is absurd that they would be making these protestations when, in fact, President Trump is the only world leader and the leader of the free world talking about balancing international trade relationships, which should be the perspective and the value of the World Bank, the Monetary Fund, the European.
The problem is that these countries have gotten away with murder for decades. Other countries, especially the United States, have not pushed back. And in any country's leadership, they'll naturally do whatever they can do to advance their country.
As the president has acknowledged, he understands they're serving their own interests. It is now time, as he says, for the United States to be asserting its interests. And thank God we've got a president who's doing exactly that, and a commerce secretary doing everything he can to execute the Trump agenda. It is
That's for sure.
It is great to see you, and much continued good luck. We appreciate it, Mr.
Thank
Secretary.
you, Lou. Thank you, Lou.
Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross. Major new developments today concerning the Justice Department Inspector General's report on the FBI's handling of the Clinton email scandal. Michael Horowitz telling the Senate Judiciary Committee it will now be released on June 14th. The long-awaited IG report is finally at hand after numerous delays. Horowitz also saying he will testify before that committee during a June 18 hearing on the report. And a shocking story today concerning the Justice Department now investigating the Senate Intelligence Committee over leaks of classified information. The Senate Intelligence Committee, described by many conservatives as the most corrupt committee on Capitol Hill, today passed a resolution authorizing Ironically, the Intel Committee is all too eager to provide documents to the Department of Justice, while the department refuses to honor the oversight authorities of Congress, refusing to provide the documents requested by those oversight committees. Well, few in the Senate are as incompetent as Intel Chairman Richard Burr and as politically corrupt as the ranking member Mark Warner. The two men have produced nothing of substance after their one-year investigation, except for, well, nonsensical and extraordinarily bizarre will soon see more documents about the origins of Spygate. Yes, Spygate, Speaker Ryan. It really exists. We'll take that up with former federal prosecutor Andrew McCarthy. He joins us here next. Straight ahead. Stay with us. President Trump urging the Justice Department to act in the case of former Democratic aide Imran Awan. The president tweeted this: "Our Justice Department must not let Awan and Debbie Wasserman Schultz off the hook. The Democrat IT scandal is key to much of the corruption we see today. We want to make a plea deal to hide what is on their server. Where is the server? Really bad. The Justice Department to offer congressional leadership known as the Gang of Eight first requested by the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, and now subject to a congressional subpoena. Those records are expected to shed light on allegations of an FBI confidential source contacting Trump campaign aides, at least 3. Shame and part of the biggest political scandal in this country's history. Joining me now, Andrew McCarthy, a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, federal prosecutor, and now National Review contributing editor. Great to have you with us, Andy. The Gang of Eight gets to look at some documents, so we're told. This is the same Gang of Eight led by Paul Ryan, who agreed with Trey Gowdy that it's just fine if you call a spy, an informant on the part of the FBI and the Department of Justice and put them in the presidential campaign of Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, well, I don't know how he can endorse what Congressman Gowdy had to say when Congressman Gowdy hasn't seen the documents yet. So, one guy hasn't seen the documents. The other guy says, I agree with the guy who hasn't seen the documents yet.
Can I hazard an answer? And that is, this is a speaker who doesn't know much about facts, but he clearly understands who his corporate masters are and will do whatever, ever they want done.
Yeah, well, the one thing I'll say about it is I was heartened by the fact that Chairman Nunes says, now this is all supposed to take place in the context of a Gang of Eight briefing, right? He says, I don't need a briefing, I need the documents. Right. And when I was a prosecutor, I didn't need an explanation for what the documents say. I can read the documents myself, thank you very much.
With Trey Gowdy, who's been on several sides of the same discussion himself, and Ryan is a man who, frankly, is a lame duck, who has very little political grasp and almost none, certainly, of intelligence. Well, as much as possible of what the Department of Justice and FBI have been hiding.
Yeah, because what he's after is to try to find out why all this happened. So we've had one of these Washington things for the last 3 or 4 weeks, it seems that. Silly discussions you've seen before, because no matter how you slice it, what they used was a covert operative who they sent in to get information. So you can call it a spy or a fink or a rat or an informant or what have you. And usually this is done by euphemism or hyperbole, depending on whose ox is being gored, right? But what we need to know is why. Because we have a norm in this country that the incumbent administration is not supposed to use these
I think it is quite, inferential logic leads you to only one conclusion. It's because Barack Obama, the President of the United States, wanted his intelligence heads of at least 3 agencies to spy for the purpose of political advantage in the election of 2016 for the candidate that he was supporting, one Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of evidence to support that. I don't want to get out in front of, because we don't have all of it, and I think Nunes is quite right. We need to get the documents and the answers, and then we can make conclusive judgments on it.
If we weren't watching a counter-truth operation led by suddenly now the Speaker of the House himself against the president, I would be somewhat more constrained, perhaps, but certainly not now with him in full attack on the president. Let's turn to the issue of McCabe, Andrew McCabe, the #2 guy who was fired at the FBI. This is a guy looking for immunity before the Judiciary Committee. You write, as always eloquently in the National Review, that it shouldn't happen at all.
Well, I'm sympathetic to the people who think it should happen because they're so tired of waiting for answers from the Justice Department and the FBI. They say, let's get this guy in a chair in front of a national TV audience and a congressional. They can't use against him the things that he says in the hearing.
For another prosecution.
Right. The effect of that ends up being it makes it very, very complicated, sometimes impossible to prosecute him. And the better way to go about this always, especially the criminal prosecution goes, look what Mueller has done in his investigation, right? When he's got guys who have lied to agents, he uses that as a hammer to get them to give them everything they have, but under the auspices of a plea agreement where they have to cooperate.
Yeah, there's something. Robert Mueller and his band of left-wing archangels that he's assembled to staff his investigation. But I am thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with you very quickly as we wrap up. Your thoughts about what Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General, what you expect. Is it going to be a blockbuster that we're going to see from him on the 14th of June?
I wouldn't say a blockbuster because I think that gets our expectations up higher than they ought to be. But in my experience, I've known Horowitz for a long time. He's a straight shooter, and I expect a workmanlike report that'll have a lot of information in it.
All right. Andrew McCarthy, great to have you here, Andy. Thanks.
Thanks, Lou.
Appreciate it. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. It gets worse and worse. 4 big technology companies partnering with the left-wing activist group with a long history of lying and smearing conservatives and, well, taking a lot of federal money and coercing a lot of money. Facebook, Google, Twitter, and Amazon, we learn, have all partnered with the Southern Poverty Law Center under the reporting of the Daily Caller. All of that allowed those technology companies to, well, promote the Southern Poverty Law Center, and that in turn has allowed the Southern Poverty Law Center to have the power to designate who and who is not in hate groups. Joining us tonight, Ed Rollins, former Reagan White House political director, Great America PAC chairman, great friend and great American. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Just in case people don't know what that organization is, it's probably the most left-wing political organization in the country, and has been forever. Yeah. Very active, very. It's where they put all their operatives when they're not basically running campaigns.
And they've got a $500 million they've raised, and no one seems to know exactly where the money came from. Some would posit that it came from the Obama administration's Justice Department as they were funneling out fines and settlements to various friends of the Obama administration. Well, it turns out the president doesn't have one friend that he probably thought was going to be a pretty good ally, and that's Emmanuel Macron. He's on his way to the Quebec for the G7, and Macron acts like he's about 8 feet tall and is going to kick around the United States of America, saying he's threatening the president with isolating the U.S. at the G7.
Lots of luck on that one. That always speaking German, if we hadn't gone to their rescue a number of times, and I had no disrespect for the French, except I think they have a weak leader, and they have another weak leader right today.
Yeah, but I think the French are quite used to that.
I think the French don't want a strong leader. I think they got exactly what they want. So
yeah, well,
but
yes, sir.
He ought to understand that we are a very important ally to them, and they had better be careful crossing this president, or he will get crushed.
Macron isn't a very bright boy if he thinks that this is the way to deal with President Trump. I mean, that's unbelievable. It's not also, you know, speaking of weak leadership and people utterly delusional, Paul Ryan, I mean, he looks like he looks like what he is, I'll put it that way, because my wife has admonished me not to call names whatsoever. But there we are. You've got Paul Ryan now under attack, everyone calling him out for the foolish, ridiculous, moronic decision to go against the president and back up Trey Gowdy, who doesn't even know what the hell he's talking about.
There's an old adage in politics and law and what have you, is never raise your own negatives. And this president is out there talking about things that he knows nothing about. Not the president, I mean the speaker, going against the president.
I wondered where the hell where are we going?
I'm getting old.
Well, I know the feeling, partner. You're in great company.
And the reality is that this is a guy who should be the cheerleader. Let's become very clear in the election on Tuesday. We could lose the majority, and the only way we're going to win the majority is if the leaders of this Congress and the candidates of this Congress go out and wrap themselves around this president's agenda. So if you want to be the leader of this party and go out and be the critique, you're going to damage your own members' destiny.
This is the time to sign the contract to keep America great and line up with the president.
Absolutely. And while you're doing that, your idea last night of vacating.
Your idea.
Well,
don't get confused.
Getting your Republican members, give him 2 weeks to pack his boxes and then basically vacate
Ed
the chair.
Rollins last night here saying that there's a way to deal with this this horrible excuse for leadership in the speakership, and that is to for a congressman or congresswoman to sit there and introduce a motion to vacate the chair and get this thing settled and get him the heck out before it's too late for the party. I got to run, partner.
Take care.
I appreciate it. Ed Rollins. Up next, betrayal. Paul Ryan and congressional rhinos dreaming up a new scheme to award amnesty to illegal immigrants and pretend it's all on the up and up as they really serve their corporate masters. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. House Speaker Ryan holding a 2-hour closed-door immigration meeting with congressional Republicans today. The lame duck rhino more concerned with, well, a process to cover what he's really doing for his corporate masters, the establishment, rather than the prospect of actual open discussion. He wants to legalize, just like his masters, amnesty for 1 million or more illegals.
You know, one of the things that I don't like about this job is how things just flow up to leadership to make big decisions, how we too often centralize power around here. I'm happiest when the members, not the leaders, when the members are making policy decisions, going through the committee process. I'm happy that we have had this process on display this morning in our conference.
The technical term for what you just heard from Ryan's mouth is pure bull. I mean, he thinks he's selling that nonsense. He hasn't had regular order. He hasn't invited discussion or debate on legislation, and he can barely get legislation through. And oh, by the way, he forgot to get a budget during his term as Speaker. With leadership like his, the Republicans don't need an opposition party. They have within their own ranks the seeds of their own destruction, and that is what will follow them into the midterm elections unless they get rid of this rhino lame duck and embrace the Trump agenda. Joining us tonight, Jessica Vaughn, Director of Policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. Jessica, great to see you. The numbers look terrible coming from the border right now. What in the world is going on? We have more Border Patrol agents. We have a president who has freed them up to do their jobs. What's happening?
Well, one of the things that's happening is talk of amnesty with this rogue group of Republicans kind of holding a gun to their colleagues in the House Republican caucus, hell-bent on passing a huge amnesty. We know from experience that's what's causing a lot of this influx. The other problem is that there is still a catch-and-release policy where people can just show up, especially with children, and ask for asylum, and we don't send them back. We're letting caravans of people in here to the country to stay for an indefinite time.
And even as we understand, and our Border Patrol agents understand, they're being lied to by schooled and trained illegal immigrants who are playing the U.S. refugee system. I want to put up a full screen just to show folks how bad it's gotten at the border here. In May, the month of May, border apprehensions of family units crossing the border illegally up 435%. Minors, unaccompanied minors, up 329%. I mean, Jessica, this thing is out of control. And the Chamber of Commerce last night had the temerity to send out a letter basically ordering Congress to push for DACA amnesty and open borders. And among the demands from Tom Donahue and the Chamber, permanent amnesty for DACA recipients, ensure 350,000 non-DACA illegals retain work authorizations, protect work authorizations for spouses of H-1B visa recipients, and reject proposals to limit legal immigration. Your reaction to the arrogance of one of the country's biggest business lobby, who own, for example, Speaker Ryan and much of his leadership group.
They got to have their cheap labor, and they're willing to throw their money around to get it. And certainly right now, this small group of Republicans with the tacit approval of Speaker Ryan and maybe Majority Leader McCarthy are doing their bidding. They're holding a gun to the head of the majority of Republicans in the House and trying to force them into a deal that is not going to turn out well, that's for the American people. And they can get away with it because for too long, these members have done their bidding, and they're going to be trying. First, they couldn't sell the majority of the caucus on these concepts for a bill, so everybody's waiting to hear the details, which they won't release, which is never a good scenario.
Did you hear Paul Ryan talking about he likes it when things bubble up in the House from the rank and file, the great unwashed on Capitol Hill?
But that's not what's happening here.
Of course it's not. I mean, he's lying through his teeth and selling that kind of nonsense to God only knows who, because it isn't the American people. They figured out who's doing what to them. Jessica, it's great to have you with us as always. Thanks so much.
Likewise. Thanks, Lou.
Jessica Vaughn. Up next, more on the shocking numbers of people trying to enter this country illegally and the efforts this administration is taking to stop them. Stay with us. We're coming right back